Hi, and welcome to the Passionistas Project Podcast. We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and today we're talking to Joan Baker, voiceover artist, teacher, and coach. She's also the author of Secrets of Voiceover Success, and along with her husband, Rudy Gaskins, she's the co-founder of the Society of Voice Arts and Sciences. SOVAS is a nonprofit organization created to enhance opportunities for gainful employment across all aspects of the voiceover industry and its related fields. So please welcome to the show, Joan Baker.
So what are you most passionate about?
What am I passionate about is transforming my particular space. That means my voice space, my heart space, my mind space, and the space between me and others. I'm about transforming that. And there's no one way to do that. So it has to be individual, like a thumbprint. That's really, truly what I'm passionate about. When I was young, I used to dream about, and I thought this was possible too, I used to dream about meeting everybody in the planet. And I kind of went about it in my own way. And one of the things that really stuck with me and still rings true to this day is connecting with everybody on this planet and being left with something from them that has me remember that. It happened to turn out in voiceover, and in particular, creating the platform of the Voice Arts Awards. It has attracted a global audience, people I would normally never meet, people that speak only Spanish or speak only Japanese and different dialects from all over the United States and UK. So it's funny that as a kid, that was a dream for me, and how it's kind of manifested in my life today. And the pathway that has gotten me there is voiceover. For me, it's about transforming my life and transforming life in a way that lands as joyful, humorous, and connected with love.
When did you first know you wanted to be an actress?
Since I can remember. That part was since I could remember. Even 4 years old, I was doing monologues in the mirror in my bedroom. I was making up dances. I was creating costumes with the clothes that I had and my mom's clothes in her closet. The only thing is I would never do or perform anything in front of anyone in my family. It was only to myself in my bedroom in front of a mirror. And I did that on a regular basis. But my dreams really were three things: being an actress, being a dancer, and being a humanitarian. And I don't know if I thought the word humanitarian, but again, it's that dream of meeting everybody in the world and connecting with them. So whatever I coined that as a 5-year-old is what I always wanted to do. But I think what I noticed was that in being an actress, one of the great things about it was how actors and actresses connected to causes. And I think that's the thing that attracted me. And I also thought that was part of being a celebrity, or part of being an actor, was that you connected to causes so you could make a difference. And that's the thing that caught my eye very, very young and made me excited. I also used to watch the Oscars and the Emmys and the Tonys as a kid. Every year, everyone had to be quiet and even leave the room because I was glued. But again, what I was glued to was people enjoy around their achievements, being acknowledged, being loved and taken care of in terms of their talents and who they were. And of course, the fashion, always ahead of its time, always pristine. That's how I saw my life. But you know, what's interesting about that is it has been anything but easy creating that life. Anything but easy. It's actually the hardest thing that I've done in my life is creating that platform that brings people together through their talents and through their joy and through their passion. It's such a challenge. I almost can't even articulate how challenging and yet extraordinary and enriching.
Tell us about that journey. What are some of the highs and lows that you've experienced along the way?
The nonprofit that Rudy and I created is called Society of Voice Arts and Sciences, and its kind of nickname is SOVAS. SOVAS oversees 2 annual events. One is That's Voiceover, which is a career expo, and the other one is the Voice Arts Awards. And they kind of go hand in hand. One is educational, and yet with an entertainment slash to it. And then the other one is an acknowledgement program that acknowledges our work. And that was something that was missing in the voiceover industry. Other industries, as a matter of fact, probably every other industry has some kind of acknowledgement program, but voiceover didn't. It was something that was missing on a scale that you could see global efforts. So I would say what's been an extraordinary high is seeing how people are enriched to the hilt with being acknowledged. It's not a given in voiceover. Partly it's because it's so competitive. To getting one job, you might have to compete between 20 and 100 or so people. So it's definitely a challenge to get acknowledged through work, let alone winning an award or being nominated for your good work. So just seeing when the nominations go out and the joy that people carry, there is nothing like it. I'd say one of the challenging things, and the most challenging thing for me personally, is that awards shows or awards competitions are very much not a known entity on how it works. So there's also been in the voiceover community a lot of preconceived notions about how this works. And it seems that Rudy and I have done and continue to do grassroots on educating people about submitting work. Like, for example, a source of pain for people that don't understand it is that when you submit your work to be scored by judging, that there is a entry fee for that. The same like when you go to a college and maybe you go to 10 colleges and you submit your college form or your university form, you pay a small fee for that. You know why? Because there's work involved. With every submission, there's work involved and somebody has to get paid. So people somehow have confused the fact that if you pay to submit your entry, that means that you automatically get a nomination. So it means that it's a pay-to-play thing. No, that's not how it works. So if we have 56 categories, which we do this year, people submit work. Now, production companies, no one's confused there. Television networks, because they do it all the time. It's the individual that comes from the voiceover community. And some people get it and some people don't. You're taking a risk. If I applied for Juilliard and I paid an entry fee to submit my materials and I didn't get chosen, I may be upset that I didn't get chosen, but I wouldn't complain about the money wasted. Everyone understands that's part of it because it's work involved. So I find it ironic almost that one of the big issues in the voiceover community is getting paid for your work and yet not wanting to pay other people for work that they're doing, and especially on behalf of you if you choose to do it. So there's this ball of confusion with some people, but every single entry that we get, someone has to work it from the back end and see it through. And I can't even tell you the phone calls on a regular basis we get because people go, I don't know what category to submit in. And that's actually critical to maybe getting a nomination. If you submit in a wrong category, you'll get disqualified. So all these things are important. It's not that they're not, but someone has to do it. And that's called work. And people get paid for it. Now, in what we do, Rudy and I have contributed our finances to what we're doing. And there was never any complaint about it. But we've given over 6 figures just to the Voice Arts Awards over a period of 5 years of our own money to see this platform thrive. And we've not received a dime for anything we've done. And we've had That's Voiceover for 10 years. Again, it started out small and it just built over the years. But Rudy and I work almost 7 days a week, about 10 hours a day. We consult and teach, and I do voiceover jobs, etc. That's how we make the money to do it. But we haven't made anything from doing it. And we also donate 5 to 10% of our ticket sales to the Muhammad Ali Center. So what's also unusual and brings joy back to joy to me is that we're a nonprofit that also donates to nonprofits. And that's very unusual. That came organically. And also, again, my mission to be a humanitarian. So that makes me extremely happy that we have set it up that way. And Rudy, You know, when you've married the right person, when they literally drop their dreams and they come on board with yours so that yours could thrive. And there's never, ever been any kind of resentment, like nothing, nothing but utter devotion. And I mean, I've never met anybody like Rudy. And he's absolutely brilliant. And if he ever decides to do something, he commits himself 200%, and you get his brilliance and genius. He is truly the reason why this even exists to the way that it does. All Rudy. So to say that in a woman's dream, to have their true love, and then you find your true love, you connect with your true love, and they drop their dreams and come on board with yours. That's just almost unheard of. I can't even tell you how utterly grateful, and how so much of my life is filled with joy and love.
Is there something you know now that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
There's been so many kind of times that I first started out. So I will go back to the very first time I started out. And that was that what I'm doing today was something that I had to cultivate, I had to study, and I had to take my knocks with it and pay dues with it. When I first started out, I just thought I sucked. And then I stopped doing it. And what that was commercial acting. So for like 10 years, I just focused on dance, very little acting, because I honestly thought, and I came from a childhood where I was a childhood actress. So when I got to New York, I just thought it was bad. So I didn't realize that, if I just kept studying it. I know this seems obvious, but it's not. I can't tell you how many people along the way that I teach now that I make sure that I say, it's a skill what you're doing. Just like when you study dance, you may actually suck at dance. But if you're bound and determined and you are passionate to do it and you have a vision of yourself doing it, you will learn to do it and you will be brilliant, regardless of where that takes you. And it's the same thing in voiceover. If it's something you really, really want to do, no one can give you permission to do it but you. No one can assess your voice and say, you will make it. That doesn't exist. You get your voice assessed so that you can learn the craft, not to be told you can do it or not. So I wish someone had told me that I can't tell you you can't do it. You have to know that you can do it, and you have to know that it's a journey, it's a path, it's a study, it's a craft. If you don't have it today and you keep doing it, you will have it tomorrow. But the permission is yours to make, not mine.
We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and you're listening to the Passionistas Project podcast and our interview with Joan Baker. To learn more about Joan's career and to buy a copy of her book, Secrets of Voiceover Success, visit joanbaker.tv. Now here's more of our conversation with Joan.
What's the atmosphere like for women in the voiceover world right now?
There is no question. I got into voiceover in 1991. The way I pursue my career is how I pursue what I'm doing now in our nonprofit and creating our platforms. I pour myself into it. So I came up all the time in 1991 till well into the 2000s with people saying to me, we don't use women's voices. These are like television networks, production companies, all kinds of entities where if it was any other industry, they'd be fired for saying such a thing. But in voiceover, everything is based on focus groups. So if in the focus group, people say, and this was the reason why things didn't change for a long time in voiceovers, because focus groups said, we trust men's voices versus women's. And this wasn't just men talking, people. These were women talking. They did not trust a woman's voice. But when was the last time you bought a product and said, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this? A woman's voice sells it in a commercial. You don't. So ultimately, it doesn't matter. What matters is, again, the passion in which we speak and communicate around anything. So it's gotten better, but there's still some areas in voiceover that are either really challenged around a woman's voice or they just don't use women's voices. And one of those areas is movie trailers. You only hear a man's voice. And it's because voiceover, remember, was based on only men doing voiceover. There were no women in the workplace. And then slowly but surely, women started to work, and not just under a man. But voiceover hasn't caught up with that yet. A lot of it is based on advertiser research. A lot of that research is actually dated because it costs a lot to do research. So I'll hear things like, if it's not broken, there's no need to fix it. In other words, we're using men. It's working fine. We don't have to change that. And also, people don't really want to take a chance because it means that they may lose lots of money. They may lose hundreds of thousands of dollars by taking a chance. So people don't like to do that in our industry. So things tend to be stuck and behind the times until it no longer is. So it's been people like me that have gone out there, including in the press, and have spoke out about it. And because of that, it has absolutely changed. And in particular, what's even changed more so is diversity within voices. It didn't used to be that at all. It didn't used to be women being hired, and it didn't used to be diversity. For example, when I first got into voiceover, women's voices in commercials only got hired for women's products. That's how far we've come. It's completely changed. And yet there's still room to grow. And again, a lot of things are based on the research, and the research is not up to date. But also, I find interesting is even with the research, and even it's not up to date, why can't you still be with the times? That doesn't make sense to me. But it has improved. It's totally opened up. And yet there's still room to grow with, in particular, women's voices. Another area that has changed completely has been diversity in voices. So that's changed. But I also think it organically had been a focus of mine too, both mine and Rudy. So I think because of that too, it's created an egg cracking open. So I think it's actually helped further that case along too.
So how do you think we get it to the next level?
I think how it gets to the next level is a couple of things. Doing great work. That always is the ultimate thing. I also think, believe it or not, the ability to risk going out there. Because we're talking about performing, and that's very different than if I was selling you this bottle of water. If you reject, in quotes, the water, you're not hurting me. But because we're selling our voices, when I don't get chosen, it's like it's personal. Where when I'm selling the water, it's not so personal. And what I try to teach people is that there's no difference between the water and you. It's not personal, but you still have to constantly, like I said, train like a warrior. That is your weapon for a lot of things. But again, the ability to take a risk, and really what that means is that when you go to take a risk on your talents, on your skills, on showing up and doing your best, having conversations with people and furthering the cause along. Also, I do think that in society, I think if women become more prominent in politics, more prominent in Washington, more prominent in our society in terms of taking positions that are usually relegated to men, I think that's going to further the cause in all industries. But the ability to take a risk, I think, is really key because especially in my work in terms of coaching and teaching, I find that men are taught to take risk kind of like no problem. Women have a much tougher time taking risks. There's actually more at risk. And in case things go awry, there's more things to overcome. So I think if somehow women can cut through and take risks and also know if it does go awry, it is not personal until we're just as equal on the playing field as men. But I think it's up to us. I don't think we can wait for the opening. I think we have to create the opening. I also think when women take a position and being an entrepreneur out there, I think it actually helps being able to take risks. So it's kind of like we have to practice risking. So I think when you do create a business and you are out there on behalf of your business, you are learning how to do that. You are learning to stand on your own 2 feet and take whatever comes your way and actually turn it into opportunity. I mean, that in itself is also a talent. But I mean, we have to get used to doing that and somehow not in our mind, that old fairy tale waiting for the prince to show up. I mean, that's something we inherited. And yet it may be covered over. But I do think that that kernel is still operating. And I do think it's better with millennials, but I think that that is just so thick with women. There's certain things with us women that are just thick, that it's going to be up to us to make that shift, that transformation, that change. I also think that we as women do have some things to learn from men, just as men have many things to learn from women. But I also think there's some things that we can learn from them that help our cause, in particular, taking a risk, standing on our own 2 feet, dealing with whatever comes our way in a positive way, in a transformational way.
Looking back at your journey so far, what's that risk that you took? What do you think is the most courageous thing that you've done that changed your trajectory?
The thing about my particular path is that I grew up around a very particular racism. And when you grow up in a community that was considered utopia, it was basically an all-white community. And at the time, my mom was the only Black in the whole entire area. And my mom was married to my dad, white. That created right off the bat an enormous amount of hate that as soon as I walked into the room, it was a challenge for a lot of people. I didn't even have to open my mouth. So one of the biggest courageous things for me is the ability to let go of people pleasing, because that was my way of dealing with it. I mean, but it was so extreme. Like I could start crying because it was so extreme. And also behind it was, there's nothing wrong with me. I remember in first grade, I remember my teacher would point and laugh at me and say, "This is the girl you don't want to be like," in front of the whole class. And all I'm doing, literally, I swear, is just sitting there. That's it. So, I mean, this was the kind of attacks that I would get, or one example of them. So I remember I would be thinking, if you only knew me, you'd like me. There really isn't anything wrong with me. But I also didn't know that that was the reason. I honestly thought it was because there was something wrong with me. I had no idea it was because of the mixed race issue. So all of that I definitely carried into adult life. And all of that was, although it was covert, my results in life were all closed, all with question marks, and nothing really made sense. So if I put out a certain kind of energy, what I would get back was closed doors. When I really took my issues and my fears and really combed through them and really sift through them, and by the way, I still do, but when I really did that for myself and really started to understand from an objective point of view what was going on in my life and in my world, and then I still went out because I was bound and determined to have a career in show business. And by the time I became about 30 years old is when everything changed. And so one of the things I realized in the change was how much fear and how much hiding I was doing. And also that when I would meet people, secretly, I would think that they owed it to me to make it up for my past. And once I got clear that that's what I was doing and I let that go, that's one of the biggest courageous things that I could do, because, there's a safety net in that. There's a safety net in going, oh, this didn't work out for me. That didn't work out. This didn't work out, but not connecting it to me and why, what key I was holding to create that result. So I would say that moment, and it was the moment, when I turned 30, that my life changed. It went from feeling like being in jail to being free. Also, I think another turning point was wanting people to, hire me for their projects. And somehow in the back of my mind, I thought to myself, I guess I'm going to have to create my own work. I didn't know how I was going to do that. I didn't know how that was going to happen. But somehow, because of the doors closing all the time, the day I met Rudy, and this happened organically, it wasn't a plan, but it organically shifted where we created our own business. We had an advertising agency before we became a nonprofit, but we created our own work. And when we did that, everything changed. Everything was on fire. Everything was hot, hot, hot. But before that, I felt like I was just kind of waiting for someone to give me permission to let the horse out of the gate. And the day that I got it was me giving myself permission to let the horse out of the gate. Life changed. That was courageous.
So what's been the most rewarding part of this business and career that you've built?
I've had a lot of highlights too in voiceover. So the way things are happening for me now is because so much time and effort is spent on the nonprofit and the 2 events that we oversee. Most of the year, I have to what is called book myself out, meaning that I'm not available for auditions and jobs because I have to spend so much time doing this, although it's my choice. And although on a certain level, I've made peace with it, I am able to perform part of the year. And also I get to perform at my own events. And it's all organic and I don't have to come up with things. I can allow myself to be. And also I'm a very trained person. I've trained in dance my whole life. I've also trained as an actor my whole life. So it really is an area where I get to unleash who I am. And I'm thrilled about that. Thrilled. So that actually is a reward. That is a huge reward for me. Also, creating the book Secrets of Voiceover Success, that is another piece of the puzzle that was just absolutely extraordinary for me. And I had no idea it was even going to happen. I was just bound and determined that somehow I was going to give back to my dad because the book donates my proceeds to the Alzheimer's Association. And so I was bound and determined when my father passed away and I was in a kind of a grieving process. I was bound and determined to do something that would change how I felt about being afraid to understand what was going on with my dad, because at the time, Alzheimer's was not a household name at all. Everyone thought he was just hating them. My dad was a very loving person, and he was also a humanitarian type. So when he got into Alzheimer's and when he was diagnosed as that, he was a completely different person, of course. So that wasn't understood generally by the average person as it is today. So I just knew that I wanted to give back. And I knew I wasn't a rich person, so it's not like I could donate money, but I wanted to do it through talents. So I also enlisted many prominent people in voiceover. And the way I created the book was I interviewed them and left their answers as their story. And I didn't know I was going to get a publisher. I just knew I had to get a publisher. And I also knew I had a lot of joy around it. So it wasn't like torture or I was, oh, it's not working. There was joy around every moment. I found it totally exciting. And it was an area I knew nothing about. Nothing. All I knew was hustle. So that book, Secrets of Voiceover Success, another unleashing and shifting of my path. And that's a highlight for me in my life. One of the biggest joys for me in show business, no question. So my book, our nonprofit, the 2 events that it oversees, and the people that I've met because of it that I would never, ever meet. Talk about passion and joy being expressed and unleashed. That is it. People are it for me. People are the reason why I love to connect and do things and go to bigger heights. And talk about the voice. People's voices. It's like being in colors. It's like swirling in colors to me. And how people develop their voices, whether it's doing voiceover, whether it's being the voice of a humanitarian project, the voice of the environment, a global voice of connection and teaching and love. That to me is the ultimate. And that is definitely what has occurred for me.
Did you have any mentors or role models along the way?
I did. I will say this. One of the number one mentors I had, my own imagination, I kid you not. It was working overtime, seeing myself, daydreaming myself into what I'm doing. That was actually a mentor. My own fantasies and imagination and daydreams. That was one. I've had a handful of what I would say extraordinary leadership in the areas that I wanted to work in. So I was never someone that went to an Ivy League school. And that would have been great. I would have gotten a lot of things at an Ivy League school like a Juilliard or a Carnegie Mellon. But instead, it feels like I've had very important assignments with certain people that have truly inspired me, whether it was spiritually, emotionally healing, as well as physical, as well as mental, in what I'm doing today. And by the way, it's a very holistic experience. So I've had inspiration in yoga. I've had inspiration in a metaphysical counselor. I've had inspiration with dance teachers. I've had inspiration with voiceover teachers, speech and diction teachers. My husband is a huge inspiration. My father is a huge inspiration. Also, my mom. My mom is still alive, and she's a huge inspiration in many, many ways. But I would say that there's definitely a handful that I feel like were destined. And the assignment was, for whatever reason, you're going to inspire me, and I'm going to take that inspiration and really do something and be truly grateful for it and pass it on. So yes, there are a number of people that have inspired me, and they're still around me today. Absolutely. And by the way, I've often said to people, in general, actually everything inspires. Life actually inspires me. Everything actually inspires me.
What's your definition of success?
Being able to transform where you are to where you need to be. Being able to do that, because how many times in life do we turn ourselves into pretzels to not have things work, to feel uncomfortable and boxed in? So I'm suggesting it's the opposite, is to unravel and have a clear vision of who you are, what you want to be in this world, and have a clear vision of that and live into that vision. And it's a constant commitment. By the way, I recommit myself every day to being unstoppable. Every single day, I recommit to that because it's very easy to lose sight. Very, very easy. So that's something I recommit every single day, to be unstoppable. That doesn't mean be obnoxious. That doesn't mean be demanding, but I mean an unstoppable force.
What's your secret to a rewarding life?
Definitely tapping into joy. I think we're all born with it. I think it covers up over time. I think to reinvent, if that's what you need to do, or tap into the joy in you, because I think success in life has to do with expressing that. There is no question you're going to attract money, people, career projects, and a certain type of life. There is no question about that. So I think joy is the key, absolute key. Ultimately, it's joy.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project podcast and our interview with Joan Baker. To find out more about the Society of Voice Arts and Sciences, the Voice Arts Awards, and the That's VoiceOver Career Expo, visit sovas.org. And be sure to subscribe to the Passionistas Project podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring guests.